We use the substantive curriculum and we also use procedure. So substantive meaning I'm teaching you the law. I will teach you criminal law, the elements of assault, the elements of murder, burglary, all of that. I will teach you contract law and their elements, but I also teach you procedural law, which mean the procedures for everything. So if you're interested in a contracts paralegal, type of position, we're going to talk about all of that, but also I'm also going to have you type up a contract, right? Or draft a legal document with contracts. So that way you're getting more of the drafting, the procedural part of it, as opposed to just learning the law. Okay? Because once again, this is not law school. So you do need to be aware of the law and elements, but you don't have to implement it and have it so well memorized that you have to relay this to your client, because that's not what paralegals do, right? The attorney has to have the law so well embedded on a certain, subject like contracts, because they have to spill out the law and guide their clients. That's not something you do. So you still have to be familiar with the law, because you will be writing up legal memos and addressing your client's issues for your attorney. So it's not like you can just put the law aside. No, but do you have to master it and absolutely have it memorized when you're talking to a client? No, because paralegals don't give legal advice, okay? But you have to be familiar with it. So that's why we try to cover the most important laws. And I throw in bankruptcy law, I throw in some of the real property, real estate law, which are not in your book, but it's just something that I throw in there because some of my students are interested. Immigration law, I'll get that covered too if you haven't heard it yet. Okay. All right. So a paralegal's education includes both of those, substantive and procedural. The substantive law, everybody, includes laws that define, like definitions, like rules of law. Okay. They define, describe, and regulate legal rights and obligations. So if we're talking about criminal law, right? You want to know what are, the legal rights for a criminal client. If we're talking Fourth Amendment, what is that? Why is my attorney telling me to go draft a memo on Fourth Amendment? Right? So we do cover the legal rights, obligations, the regulations, federal law, and state law. Okay. For example, this is an example of substantive law. So you guys can have an example here. A law prohibiting employment discrimination on the basis of age falls into the category of substantive law. Yeah, we want to know, what law is that? What law violates, right? What law is going to help everybody not discriminate, including employers? We talked a lot about that in employment law, okay? It's stopping employers from basing their, I guess, hiring, you can say, or their employees, basing them, well, how old are they? Age. That is called discrimination, and that is something that is substantive law. We need to know how it works. We need to know the elements of it. We need to know who's discriminating and who's not, because not everything's discrimination. So we really need to know, what do they mean by age, right? What did the employer do to discriminate on age? So there's got to be facts, of course. There has to be rules that they violated. And of course, there has to be elements that have to be met. Okay. Procedural law is the opposite. It establishes the methods of enforcing the rights established by the substantive law. Questions about what documents need to be filed to begin a lawsuit. So when I talk about procedural law, what's the process? I always think of the word process, or what's the procedure, right? What's the procedure of filing a complaint with the courts? What's the procedure of starting a contract case, right? Procedural law. Normally it's documents for you, the paralegal. What documents do you have to fill out? If I asked you to go draft a complaint right now and you have no guidance on it, what would you do? Right? And that's the point I try to make a lot in our classes, is if I ask you to draft something, I always give you a template, and I always give you information, and I give you a sample of a complaint, or I give you, we do it in class or something of that sort. But there will be times, everybody, when you're actually in the law firm and your attorney asks you to draft a document you've never heard of. Absolutely happens all the time. I don't care if you're in the field for 15 years. There's always going to be that one document that you've never heard of, or there's a new law for it. Maybe that's why you've never heard of it. Maybe they just added it. Okay. And I also guide you on how to deal with those type of situations because it does happen. All right. So, and then we also have to worry about when the documents need to be filed. Okay. What is the second most important thing? The first thing is ethics with paralegals. The second most important thing is to get the documents in on time. The courts are extremely strict on filing documents. If they say 30 days, that document needs to be in 30 days before closing of the court, for sure. If you do it at, let's just say the end of the day is 5:30 for the court, and you decide to go and file it at 5:31, they won't accept it. So documents, deadlines, absolutely need to be something that you're aware of. Now you think, how do I know when these documents need to be filed? What are the deadlines? Every document has a different deadline. There are some times when your attorney will give you the deadline. There's sometimes when your attorney won't tell you anything. Because remember, they're busy working on other things. So what do? I'll give you that kind of information too. What do we do if we have a document and when's the deadline for this document? How long do we have? How long do I have for my client to give me all of their documents so I can file their documents with the court's document? Things like that. Okay, so filing deadlines are very important. What documents do you need to use are absolutely important. You never want to file the wrong document with the court. That just, prolongs your client's case. Clients aren't happy with it. Now it's like, okay, now we're waiting an extra week because we forgot to file the right document and all of that. And your attorney is definitely not excited about it either. Okay. Now another thing you guys have to worry about. So first we have to worry about which document. This is procedure, everyone. Which document do we have to file first or fill out first of all? Second of all, when should the document be filed? What's the deadline? Third, which court do I file it in? I know it seems simple, like, oh, there's a court up the street. That's